My concern was that if it was over 2 years, it might feel like a disconnect by the second year. Because, I've always felt that the songs that you're writing that year, you need to get them on an album that year. So it matches up with what you're thinking at the time. But actually, luckily with this one, it let me spread it over the 2 years without sounding like it had disconnected from each other. Every time I came up with a name, I would go through 25 pages of Google and then eventually find it used by somebody else. And I thought, if I go with quite a long but creative name, it solves every problem, because not only has no one else used that combination, but it's unusual and kind of, it wasn't done to be attention grabbing, but it will automatically be attention grabbing when you've got a title that long.
Yes, of course it will.
It gives you the chance, like I did, to make 2 title tracks as well.
Okay, so I guess the big difference here, the big departure or change, is you brought a new instrument into the mix.
I sort of started where a lot of people start. If you look on the internet and Google what's a very handy starter harmonica, and lots of people say the Hohner Special 20. And I think the reason they say that, from what I can gather, is because it's quite easy to get around and it doesn't make you force anything, but also people can take it on professional situations as well.
I remember being quite confused by a professional instrument for 25 quid.
I know. I think what it is in many ways is that you, depending on what you want to do with it, you need like 4 or 5 of them in different keys.
Yes, that's true.
I think that's where it starts to build cost. Bringing a new instrument in when you're not 10 years old anymore is a tricky old thing to do.
There's no visual cues either on a harmonica.
I would take what I could from YouTube lessons, from noises they would make to try and explain, things you're supposed to do with your face.
Yeah.
Literally the only advice I have for anybody on harmonica, because I'm still a beginner, is look for as many of the same lesson as you possibly can with different teachers. Because you will get that one person and you go, oh, that's what you mean by that facial muscle movement. Because that's all it takes, is explaining something for you. But yeah, I was quite lucky actually with the harmonica playing that I did on I've Got All Day album. Something has clicked by that point, and I've done it enough that it sounds like a harmonica player to some degree anyway.
Let's go straight into gear while we're there.
Ibanez PGM 80p, one of those guitars that I probably would never bring myself to sell unless it was a emergency situation, Although the neck was huge, it didn't matter at all. It was a way of also having a whammy bar that was not at all complicated to use. Now I like locking tuners over any other type of tuner. I like high frets over any other type of fret. This is interesting because that was the first album for the PGM and this was the last album for the JS. I think the 1200 did roughly half and half with the PGM, just under half and half both the guitars, I think.
Yeah.
And again, on the recordings, I can pretty much tell which one it is because the PGM is that much brighter and there's just something about the JS that I was very used to hearing. Even though I was ready to let it go, the JS, I remember the night before we took it out to sell it, I did open the case and have a look at it. Ibanez AEG 10.2. So it's quite an Ibanez dominated album, really. Epiphone ES339 Pro. Used the coil split on one of them, and again, there's something about those Epiphone coil splits that I don't know what it is. Only they know, obviously. This was the last album to use the Tone Lab as well, which sounds crazy. Vintage modified Squire, a jazz bass, is still there, and like I said, that will be there until it literally splits apart in front of my eyes. Hohner Marine Band crossover. Different keys of special 20s. The main reason I used them more than any other Hohner was the sound, actually, because a lot of other harmonicas are quite toppy, and I like the fact that the special 20s sound quite metallic. The usual K240 AKGs. Professional still back then in 2018 and 17. Scarlet 18i8 again, the Focusrite.
Any standout tracks for you, Joe?
Thanks for the Memories, which was that little improvisation that was just two electric guitars, no bass, no drums. It was actually written around my grandma and myself. The January before, we lost my gran, and then we dedicated an album to her. And then the next January, we lost grandma. I had to pull some psychological tricks on myself to get from A to B there,
Yeah.
And it is surprising how humans are so weird. Like you can trick yourself whilst knowing you're tricking yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it made all the difference to get into the end, because
a lot of it's psychological.
The sort of happy poppy one would be Game of Chance, which is a little bit, depending on your angle, is a little bit 60s pop. A lot of the 60s stuff was like that. It was just optimistic. I wanted to make sure that if the harmonica is only going to be on the album for a short amount of time, I wanted to make sure it was in carefully thought out places, but also unexpected. Making Time was on there, which was the one that was dominated by the harmonica, but also has that 339 solo on it.
Yep.
Always been super happy with that 339 solo, from a feel and guitar sound setup point of view.
Where can we have a listen?
Pretty much everywhere with this one. Usual streaming and purchasing, because obviously you can do both from some services, can't you? So
yeah,
Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, Napster, Tidal, YouTube and YouTube Music, and obviously on the website, which is how we generally listen to these for preparation. Yeah. It's just where I'm not well known. I have to put my full name and the album in. You can't just take shortcuts. Mind you, with this album, I imagine you could, because of the name.
Yeah, well, yes.